A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, and welcome to another challenging week in the wine industry for South Africa. Look, it's a challenging week on so many fronts. It's a challenging week for the restaurant trade, for the entertainment industry, for people who work in gyms or in cinemas or in casinos. It's an enormously challenging week, and it's really important to take cognizance of this for people who work in the medical field. Brother-in-law is a doctor who gives me regular first-hand accounts of just how difficult things are in our hospitals at the moment, and I am certainly not playing down the challenge that we face as this third wave, especially here in Gauteng, runs rampant across South Africa. But that notwithstanding, it is just so hard not to wonder why we are still in this space, why more has not been done a little earlier to make things a little better, and why it just seems that the lowest hanging fruit is always the liquor trade. And once again, it gets hit with a big stick. And it's quite easy to say, and many people have, and I think in a well-intentioned way to try and soften the blow. Well, you know what, it's just a couple of weeks. You can live without a glass of wine for a week or two, and you'll get through it. And that's absolutely true. You might not like it, but you can get through it. Of course you can. But that's not really what the major issue is. The issue is that our industry that already has been through such a horrific time in 2020 is now facing another 2 weeks, hopefully only 2 weeks, of liquor trade banned, not just on-site, but off-site as well. And that really turns the screw just a little tighter on a part of the South African economy that is already doing so much to try and get back to where it was. And so all we can really do today is raise a glass to the incredible people in the affected industries, but specifically from the point of departure of Dan Really Likes Wine to the wine industry, which is full of dear friends of mine and people I hold in enormous regard. Hope that somehow they manage to get through these next 2 weeks and get back on their feet, that it doesn't last longer than 2 weeks, and that when they do, we'll all be straight back out to support them, to get behind them, to get behind our restaurants, to get behind our cafes and our bars, and to try and help a huge employer in South Africa. So, yeah, raise that glass, but we'll also try and put a smidgen of a smile on your face. The current circumstances, be they as they may, and we'll do so by trying out some really cool wine. Now, there are two reasons I'm super excited about today. One is that a little later on, I'm going to be opening a rather old bottle of wine, and there's a particular reason why I'm opening this exact vintage. I'm really excited to do so, and I'll explain why just a little later on. Though also going down to Calitzdorp, albeit virtually, as we meet up with the Fledge and Company. Who on earth are they? What are they doing? And how are they making wine? We'll find out in just a second. Before we do that, a couple of things to put out. Look out tomorrow morning for two things to keep an eye out on. One of them is a brand new video from Bartney as we chat to Relvit, the winemaker, and try and find out why this little corner of Bannock Valley has won international awards in both Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon. What are they doing right? Is it just the terroir? Is the winemaker a magician? Is Michael Jordan buying off the judges again? Well, we'll find out. We don't know how that goes up tomorrow on our various platforms. And then make sure you are following us. Make sure you are following the Anthony Rupert wine team, because tomorrow, on the back of International Rosé Day last week, we have got a 3 litre bottle of the Jean Roy Rosé. You can pretty much bath in that. Well, I'm not sure you'd really want to. And that is going to go to some lucky winner, and we will get that competition up and running tomorrow. So look out on our social media platforms. Then on Thursday, we got a cool show on Thursday. We're celebrating International Shiraz Day. It's a day of wine somewhere everywhere. Thursday's Shiraz Day. And we're going to be talking to Kevin Arnold and his famous Kevin Arnold Shiraz, drinking both the 2007 and the 2017. Also, Carl Schultz of Hartenberg, the Gravel Hill. Gee, it's great wine. The 2006 vintage and the 2016. We'll be talking about Luddite. Unfortunately, their wine was only going to arrive today. It has been held up until the current situation changes, but we'll still talk to Neil Sverberg about it. And then stepping away from the Shiraz, we'll move to the Syrah, and we'll be tasting Damascene from 2 different terroirs. So a really cool show coming up on Thursday. I think there's a pretty cool show coming up tonight as well, though. A little later on, off to Overgaauw with David Van Velden to discuss some wine. from almost 43 years ago, at least 43 years ago. We'll find out why. Right now, though, let's go down to Calitzdorp, where they've got the internet especially for us today, and say a very warm welcome to Leon. Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine.
Evening, Dan. Yeah, if the signal does cut out, it's because there's an ostrich on the line. So yeah, we are a bit in the sticks here.
Downtown Calitzdorp. Welcome to the show. We're not seeing each other in person. We were supposed to meet up over the weekend, and the nastiness that is COVID preempted that. But it'll happen soon. At least we get to catch up here, and as well as trying your wine, which I'm very excited about doing, we also get to tell your story, and it's a really cool story, and it's a rather novel and different and slightly maverick-like approach to the world of wine. Talk us through first of all the Fledge and Co. What inspires the name? Who's behind it? And how this partnership came about?
The partnership came about one evening in Stellenbosch when this dark-haired lass stole my cap, and then I said, "Well, you can't do that." And she said, "Well, let me put a kiss on you," and that's how I met my wife. And if I suddenly move quickly, it's because there's a mullet-headed toddler running around because he wants to watch the Tubbies. So I was supposed to study accountancy, finished that, and my wife is from a winemaking family. She's the 8th generation of Nel to make wines at Boplaas. And it's at serendipitous happening at a braai, ended up changing my career path. So the Fledge and Company, the fledge is a little bird that either gets kicked out the nest or is asked to leave. We still don't know what we are at the moment, and company, if you mildly English, although I'm Leon Kutsia, I'm from the Northeastern Cape. You started a business, it's either daughters or sons or Pty Limited, and we went for and company because there's two of us, and the Calitzdorp registration number on the bakkies are CO. So we are proudly terroir by truck, as we like to call it. We don't own a cellar. We work with really good farmers. All our fruit is hand picked. So a lot of effort and love goes into it. Pick early in the morning, drive to the Boplaas cellar in Calitzdorp, and then we make our wines there. And then the other part of the day is spent making all Boplaas's wines. So, we started in 2007, only released our first wine in 2012. And, we've grown sort of organically. Some might say like a mushroom, because currently this vintage we've worked with more than 50 vineyards, and our tally of varietals tops 28. So we don't really have TV, so we always like to say we're wine people and we like making wine. So my wife, as I said, is Margot Nell. She's from a long line of winemakers, and especially fortified winemakers. So we're going to be tasting one of her muscats this evening, and then that's it. We've got two of our Fledge and Company wines. So
it's a little
that's the long and the short.
A little blank bottleish, that chasing wine up and down the country and all manner of varietals, putting them together. It's an interesting approach. It's not brand new, but it's certainly one that's a little rarer than the more conventional. How do you go about that, broadly speaking? How do you find vineyards? How do you decide on grapes? What dictates what you're making and why you're making it?
Well, thankfully, I didn't study wine. As I mentioned, I was an accountant, almost like Gavin Brevard from B. Vintners, although he went to Elsenburg. I didn't want to wear PT pants in public too often, so I didn't do that. I went the finance and marketing route. And my wife's a master's degree in viticulture. So what we always do, we go to the Young Wine Show and taste wines. And the wine fraternity is really, there's a few industries that are so open and so friendly. So if you taste a lekker wine, you chat to the winemaker and they say, "Oh no, grapes come from here and there." So a bit like building Toyota, we reverse engineer the wines. Very simple. The right grape in the right place makes the right wine. It took us a while to figure out that good grapes make good wine, and you can't make good wine from bad grapes. So for us, it's just fascination and like focusing on the grape variety and the right terroir. So we're also big believers in a blend. So unfortunately, we're not going to be tasting the Vagabond today, but that wine, the Vagabond, is a Cape White blend. It encompasses 16 to 18 vineyards and 6 to 7 varietals, and 2021 will hopefully have 10 varietals in it, and that for us showcases the best of the Cape. So we get the best little bits and put them together. Even the most entry-level wine we do, I shouldn't call it that, because everything's made by hand, everything's made by love and in small quantities. Even that one, the Nell and Coetzee Shannon, is all old bush vines from the Swartland, and it's about, I think there's about 4 vineyards into that one, and the oldest being from 1972 and the youngest is 1983. So it's just about finding the right grapes and working with the good farmers and just bringing them back as quickly as we can in a big truck, and not mucking about too much in the cellar. Thankfully, we've got an old cellar, so there's no fanciness, and we've just got to rely on the greatness of the grape. So, yeah.
Your wife gets a fair amount of credit there, and her Boplaas heritage is being picked up by a couple of people. Lyle Wilkins. Funnily enough, I'm drinking a 2016 Boplaas port right now watching this. Cold, raining winter Cape Town. And Nonqabo Lushaba, love the story and the cross-pollination with the Nell family of Boplaas. Actually love their gin and port wines. And Ina Smith, the head honcho of Shannon Blanc. A warm welcome to my Shannon friend, Leon. You've mentioned Margot. She obviously has great heritage, and you've got some fine winemaking skill there as part of the partnership. But I suspect, Leon, you might just be downplaying your own contribution just a little. Yes, you didn't study, but I'm guessing you've picked up a fair amount along the way. What is your actual role? How hands-on, how stuck in do you get to the fledge process?
I'm actually a handlanger, which is Germany. I always pull that one out, and they go, "Oh, we know exactly what a handlanger is." So I go out and find the grapes, work with the farmers, go pick them, drive them back, do all the manual labor, and then my wife makes sure that the science part and that's all done right. So it's a great combination, because she's got the formal studying, and then I started out in 2007 when a mate of mine said I can't make wine, and I said to him, well, we'll see about that, and got a harvest job and what they call a cellar rat, and that's where I started. I worked with Nico Vermeulen from Havana Hills at that stage in Durbanville, and ever since then it's just continual working with the grapes and working in the cellar, doing everything, and talking to a lot of old farmers and old winemakers and new winemakers, and tasting a lot and reading a lot. So that's the one lekker thing about wine, is that if you're really interested in it and really enthused by it, you can learn a hell of a lot without even going into a classroom. So we've also been very fortunate to drink a lot of good wines as well. Not that my father-in-law keeps any. He's famous for not having much of a cellar. So the lockdown version 5.5 is going to be tough for him. But we squirrel a bit away.
You speak of education. That is exactly what we're getting from you in a moment as we try a few of the wines. Sean Theodore Matthijs, Lekker Leon Coetzee. I'm just glad the Fledge wines made it in time. There you go, Sean, who is, he basically runs Ken Forrester. Ken takes all the credit, Sean does all the work. And then watching on YouTube at the moment, clueless wine guy Eric. The Fledge and Co make amazing wines. I love their wines. Well, let's find out how amazing they are, Eric. I suspect you are right. And begin with the first of them, which speaks to this slightly maverick sense that I referred to earlier. In fact, if I look at the bottle, Yikan Bareru, which I'm almost certain is Finnish, but for what I'm not sure. And then the story behind it, wine that's a 50% blend of old vine-ish wines from Stellenbosch and the Swartland. This forms part of a kind of a, I don't know, I'm not sure if a side project is the right way to put it, but the developmental range, for want of a better word.
Yeah, it's in 2018 we saw the recession depression clouds coming, and you can't open a bottle of 400 Rand or 300 Rand wine every night, and we bought a lot of fruit. So then we decided to launch some younger wines and fresher wines. So that's how the Chicken Bareru or Chicken Barrels came about. My wife and I love Japanese cartoons, Studio Ghibli, and we're fascinated by the Japanese and their culture, and how experimentation is something to be held in high regard, although they've got a very traditional society, as you well know from going to the World Cup, Dan. There's majorly scientific, like sci-fi stuff, and then next door there's a Shinto temple which hasn't changed for 500, 600 years. So we decided we've got to offer the South African wine lover more bang for his buck. So we take the old vine fruit and we put it in a bottled younger. Our website is totally out of date, unfortunately. That's what happens when you have two small children, and time just flies. So the 2020 that you've got in your glass is it's 100% old bush vine Swartland Shannon, and the label. There's a lekker story behind that as well. My label design friends, they always go on holiday, and then I always need a label, so I usually just draw them up in crayon and then fax them to them. And this one is inspired by the Karate Kid, Daniel's son. So there's Afrikaans saying, "Dink jy die son skyn uit jou gat uit," which we can translate for English to you. But it basically means, do you think you flash? And we don't think we flash, but what's in the bottle is always flashier than the outside. So we also just put a lekker label on, nice bright colors that can entice you on the shelf. But yeah, the wines are always, we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we do take the wine seriously. So this is lekker old bush wine, Chenin Blanc from the Swartland. It's for me quintessentially Swartland. You've got that peach, apricot. There's that little bit of baking spice, some warmth. These are all schist, lots of schist soils and shale, and a little bit of ironstone as well.
Remember there, I thought you said bacon spice, and I thought maybe the Spider Pig guys had got to you and infected you with their PR, which Mr. Wibbly does so cheerfully. It's become, I think it's gone well beyond being a little cult corner of our wine world. I think the appreciation of old vine Chenin is something that is now a lot more widespread, a lot more understood, a lot more appreciated. People are actively seeking it out. Just from a winemaking perspective, what's the delight like when if somebody phones you up and says, we've got some grapes, or we've driven past a vineyard that looks like it might be up for grabs, and you go and find something, you discover these, and you begin that journey in taking these old and often unkept and not looked after at all old vine grapes and put them on that path to making a beautiful Chenin.
Well, we've just been like totally lucky, Dan. We've got a few friends who make wines for bigger sellers, and they always want to take a bit more fruit, and that's how sometimes we've cottoned on to some vineyards, and lots of farmers that we know. It's the old vine fruit. You don't have to do much to it. It's when they treat it right, and fortunately work with really good farmers who their job is to grow grapes. Their job is to be custodians of the land and employ folks and pay them fairly for a hard day's work. It's not an easy job in the least. So the old vine fruit's always super concentrated. When these vines have stood the test of time, to rip off a beer brand's logo there. But it just helps you a hell of a lot. You just don't do anything in the cellar. You just guide it and nurture it and don't mess it up. So particularly 2020 was a difficult year, but the old vines, 2019 we had a little bit of rain, and that showed. They're very grateful when they get rain and when they're treated and nurtured as our farmers do. So it's just always lekker. Some of them are also in the most beautiful places. There's one vineyard that we work with in Pakketberg, and you look out towards Portable and these rolling wheat hills, and the other ones in the Kasteelberg, and you just see the whole Riebeek Valley and the Berg River, and the one other side, Malmesbury. You can even smell the Atlantic Ocean if you breathe deep enough. And then it's only about a 20-minute drive, and then you had Marmalade Cat for Babuti, and a lekker cold glass of Chenin. So we're very blessed to say the least.
You're winning fans, not just for the wine, also for your artwork. Your crayon scratchings have clearly found favour. Not Shaba, the label, she says with great exclamation, and clearly a fan. It is very striking. Then Reginald Peckler checking in from Cheetah Plains up in the Sabi Sands. Great to see you, Calitzdorp magician. Words only cannot describe the masterpiece. Say, Leon, I call it wine madness in the bottle. Keep on spreading the wings further. Well, I think that probably goes without saying, because you are crossing left, right, and center and bringing together the different wines that you have. The next of which is your Syrah. I've got no doubt there's an exciting story behind this one, so give it to us.
Famously, we don't like Syrah, Dan, but we end up buying about 12 tons a year. The folks who know me well, like Uncle David Trafford, or Davey as I like to call him, if he sees this video, he's going to be shocked and delighted equally, because I've actually got a buttoned up shirt. So we're more Shiraz people, but because this guy in the UK wanted some wine, he said, no, you got to call it Syrah. And then we also didn't have a label, and he gave us about 3 weeks to get everything done. And once again, I had to phone my label friends, and they were going on a surf trip. So I said to them, what works the best? They're like, no, just send us a photo. So I went through travel photos that we had. My wife and I were very fortunate to go to Chile. We were supposed to go last year, and then we had a child, and this year, not going to happen. But then I found this photo that looks like the Hang 10 chocker. So that's what the Syrah is about, just being relaxed and sitting around a brine, having a glass. So the 2018 Syrah, it is a 50-50 blend of fruit from the Trudeau Valley, Marie-Bert, on sandstone shale, and then 50% which was farmed by Mark Wallace, who's now sitting in Perth, making wine there in Elgin on Boplaas shale. Our winemaking on both the red and the white is very simple. Hand harvested fruit, get it in as quickly as possible. The reds, we're very fortunate. We've got these open fermenters called Lagars in Portugal, or Caper in Afrikaans, or open top cement fermenters, according to Auntie Jancis's books. But they're just jacuzzis. So they've got a cooling plate in it, chuck the grapes in there, leave them for a day as cold as possible, and the next day we just do traditional winemaking, a little bit of pigage, move the stuff around. Because we work in an old cellar, we got to use yeast, unfortunately, but we use very sympathetic yeast. All they do is eat sugar and give us alcohol. And then this goes to large format barrels, 500s and 300s, French and American, for about 14 months. And then we bottle it without any additions or fining or any mumbo jumbo. And this is the type of Syrah we like. It's not your black pepper. It's more delicate, more wild. A little bit of white pepper. Yeah, and lots of meatiness.
It's not badly on for a wine that you don't like.
You should have seen Tim Atkins' face when I said to him I don't like Shiraz. He almost had a coronary attack. And then I always put my foot in it, unfortunately, and then I had to explain to him. But the best Shirazes in the world are Syrahs. They're just hedonistic, and they make you. My Chilean friends have a good saying: you want to be the milk, so you can look up towards the cream, because the cream of the crop is always incredibly great. And as a category, Shiraz, a lot of it's boring, but then there's some good stuff. So I told Tim that, and he almost had a heart attack, and then I had to. The 5-minute allocation was spent chatting to him like how I really love Shiraz and how it perplexes me and vexes me and excites me in ways. And instead of just telling him taste the wine. So it's a cool climate combination, and we don't make too much of it. I think there's 2,000 bottles, and that's about that. And it will age quite well. We're sticklers when it comes to the ability of wines to age. Like the 2020 Shannon is still super fresh. It can go for another 2 years. This Syrah can age for another 5 to 10 quite easily. Depends if you've got the patience and if you've got any wine left after the next 2 weeks. So hopefully not.
It is the second of our two wines. Paul Sugar, reflecting on the story and the Chilean connection. That's a beautiful story, says Paul, before following up with a very astute assertion that Elgin produces beautiful character wines. Elgin certainly does. And then a word from Alexander Reichel, who would appear to know you. Alexander Lecker, Leon, glad to hear that you still have a way with words. I think that's been made very clear this evening, as you have a way with wine, but you've got a little guidance in that area, as we've made clear this evening. The third wine is more of a family affair, and that it extends beyond just your wife. This is the Noel family. This is Boplaas. And before we try the wine itself, let me just grab the bottle. I know Derek Kilpin from Great Domains is watching this with a chuckle because I tried to open a bottle like this with a Coravin 3 weeks ago while being distracted by my 4-year-old son and had to replace the Coravin the next day. We see the bottle, see the closure. Immediately we think, oh, this is going to be Cape Vintage. It's a port style wine. It's going to be thick and viscous and heavy and whisk away winter. It's certainly a wine that is not bad for winter, but it's not quite what people might be expecting from the bottle. And it's that word muscadel that'll give it away.
Yeah. We ran out of the bottles, Dan. So we had to bottle in the normal port bottle for our Cape Vintage. So yeah, it's apart from not having light sometimes and not being able to do normal business, we also ran out of bottles. So yeah, we just had to stick them all in this one bottle. The bottle shape is a bit deceiving, but the label says it, red muscadel. And the lacquer thing is, you can see where we're from. So that's the view from the cellar door. And the back there's the Swartberg. And the Swartberg has snow on it. Hopefully it's going to snow tonight. Hopefully the cold front has come through. And yeah, it's a perfect wine to definitely beat the winter blues with if you've got one or a case lying in a dark corner. No, this is my wife and I love making the fortifieds. We love making wine. That's why we do it. And yeah, the old style of Muscat used to be these monsters of 20% alcohol and 400 grams of sugar, and they basically give you type 2 diabetes with the first sip. But as things change and as the modern age has come upon us, alcohol is very expensive, so we don't want to use too much. The alcohol levels have come down. Sugar levels are still high, but not as high as they used to be. This, incidentally, we don't have red muscadel on the farm because we sold a portion of land to a family member who then promised us they won't pull out the vines. And 3 weeks later, we saw the bulldozer go past and they pulled out the red muscat. So this comes from arguably one of the best areas to find red muscat and muscat besides Calitzdorp, and that is Montague. So this lovely pinkish red muscat comes from vines grown on decomposed sandstone shales in the Koo and Casey Valley. We went and picked up the fruit, brought it back as we do with all the Fledge stuff. Incidentally, the Fledge drives about 20,000 kilometers just in vintage. Don't worry, we are carbon ultra negative. We've got 3,600 hectares of spec boomer, and these little buggers suck up all the CO2 in the atmosphere. We joke they're the only things that work in the Karoo because they work non-stop. And my father-in-law, we're very fortunate that he's a big Conservancy fan, and there's a bit of land that he's put under Conservancy, and we're working with other farmers as well to protect frankly, for lack of a better word, extremely fragile ecosystem. Calitzdorp and the surrounds are. Let's actually talk about the wine, but the plants are sometimes more fascinating. We've got more plants than the entire Europe within a 100-kilometer radius, and there's species of plants here like the guariboom. We've got guaribooms that are 2,000 years old. It's mind-bending. So when you come down, we'll take you into the veld and show you a guari and sit under it and drink a glass of, depending on how cold it is, either Shannon or this muscat. But yeah, this muscat there's few things in the world that are as joy-inducing as some muscat. You got that lovely raisins. There's a little bit of rose petal, and yeah, you just know it's going to be good.
It is certainly on the sweeter side, but it's a wonderful introduction if you're just getting to know the Cape Vintage Port style wine. There's still a great lightness to it. That colour's glorious, and it is a perfect note on which to raise a glass there to you, Leon, and thank you. We're heading down to Stellenbosch in just a moment. As soon as life returns to normal, I shall be on a plane down to George and then onto the tractor you'll have waiting for me and sweep down to Calitzdorp. But in the meantime, regards to Margot and to the Boplaas team. And thanks for sharing the Fledge story. It's a lovely story. It's a fascinating story. It's a passionate one. And you're making some really inventive and exciting wine. And it's an absolute pleasure to drink it. So thank you, Leon.
Only the greatest pleasure, Dan, and glad Aramex arrived just in time on Friday. So, but yeah, hope everybody keeps warm, and thanks ever so much for having us on, Dan. And yeah, enjoy David. I'm going to sit in the waiting room and drool at that pinotage.
All right, so there we go. Leona Rasmus from down, Kutsia from down at the Fledge and Company. And we just missed there. Kathy Rath wanting to find out. Fabulous chat. Does your father-in-law still microlight? We'll have to get a message back, and we'll answer that question for you, Kathy, before the show is done. And Paul Sugar, so good to hear about the environmental side of the wine. And I think it's an area we're finding more and more of our wine producers are not just appreciating the value of from well, it looks good, but actually understanding that it makes for a better wine product, makes for better farming, makes for better produce. And that is increasingly on the agenda of not just the people drinking wine, but the people making it as well. So good to pick up there. But right, let us say goodbye to Calitzdorp. I suspect that the entire bandwidth of Calitzdorp for the month has now been used up, and head down to Overgaauw instead. And there's a reason why I am opening this particular wine. I'm going to grab the bottle here from beside me. And this is a bottle of 1978 Overgaauw Pinotage that I picked up. Where did I get it? I think this might have been a wine auction or from a mate in the industry. I think Roland Pence might have got this to me. Anyway, wherever I did get it from, 1978 is an important year because 1978 is the year that I was born. And the day after tomorrow, Wednesday, the 30th of June, I shall be celebrating my birthday and doing so with great excitement. And I always try and open a bottle if I happen to have one from my birth year. And I'm lucky to have one or two in the cellar. And this one coincided with wanting to have somebody on the show to help celebrate my birthday. So down to David Van Velden I go and say a very warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, David. Lovely to have you.
Hi, good evening or good afternoon, Dan. Good to see you, and yeah, very excited to be sharing the wine with you and a bit of stories and be part of a bit of a birthday celebration, I guess.
So it's something you need to know, and you'll appreciate this, David, because I know going back to 1905 and Abraham getting things kicked off, there's a real sense of tradition in the Van Velden family. There's also a real sense of tradition to the Nickel family. We try and celebrate our birthdays for about a month. My wife, who's an absolute killjoy, has reduced mine to a week, which I feel is almost unacceptable. But she's a lawyer, so I have to do what I'm told. But this is kicking off a week of celebration. And I'm so happy to be doing it with a brand that's got such a wonderful story and such a sense of history. And it's a story I'd love you to tell us, if you will, going back to 1905 when a bit of a tragic story. Your great-grandfather, I think he was orphaned when he was just a year old, went back to stay with his grandparents, and years later was able to get hold of this patch of land that gave rise to what is now the Overgaauw Empire.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it's always a pleasure to be delving back into history and the history of the farm, and it always sort of keeps one humble and sort of focused, and sometimes almost sort of very inspiring to focus on the future and not always get stuck in the past. So it's super valuable to be sharing and sharing this bit of heritage in a glass of wine with you as well. But yeah, so when my great grandfather bought the land from in 1905, he started off by wanting to pay tribute to his grandmother on his mother's actually his grandmother who was married to the first Van Velden who arrived in South Africa in 1874, and yeah, so her maiden name was Overgaauw, and that's where the name of the farm comes from. And yeah, at that stage, there was a lot of livestock, a lot of fruit farming in the area, and he was and obviously grape growing as well. So he then built the winery. Well, first thing he had to do is build the stables in 1905 to start farming the land with the horses. And 1909 he finished the winery and made the first vintage in the winery in 1910. And then in 1949, my grandfather got involved. Also David Van Velden, and he was extremely passionate and pioneering and in everything that he sort of. And it's what is really interesting, especially in those days when he took over, there weren't any nurseries around, so you couldn't just order your X amount of vines per hectare that you want to plant. You had to graft your own vines in your own nursery, and he just over time was extremely involved in planting more vineyards on the farm gradually. Well, up until 1976, we still farmed tobacco in the farm. So luckily, none of that anymore, or luckily or unluckily, I guess it's debatable. But and then so also very instrumental in sort of fine tuning clonal selections, varietal selections coming into South Africa. Was also involved, and that's where I really enjoyed sort of listening to Leon, and always have a big regard for the people for the Nels at Boplaas, who was also pioneering in port production. My grandfather was one of the first also to plant some Portuguese cultivars, so still very much part of our heritage and game plan at the moment. I always enjoy chatting with Leon about different cultivars in different areas of different Portuguese cultivars. So my grandfather always had a big passion for that. And then in probably the turning point was the sort of very significant in the Overgaauw history was 1969, when my grandfather and Frans Malan from Simonseg, they were great mates, and they traveled to Bordeaux together in 1969, and they ended up in Chateau Latour. Fascinated by the winery. I had the privilege to visit there a number of years ago, and ended up in the underground barrel cellar. And the two of them noticed, well, what are these barriques standing all over the place? It was for them completely new, because at that stage I only knew concrete tanks and large foudres. So they made an arrangement with Latour to buy second fill barrels from them and imported that to South Africa, which makes Overgaauw and Simonseg the first to actually mature red wine in small barrique. So that was quite exciting. And that was also the moment where my grandfather decided, okay, well, he's going to stop, because up until 1970, all wines on the farm were sold in bulk. And then in 1970, decided, like, no, that's gonna end. He's going to start his own brand under the Overgaauw label, and that's where the label started. And and it's super special to be able to share a wine that's only 8 years after the first release of Overgaauw. And what's also very significant about this, Dan, and I think for your birthday, I'll replace the bottle that you just opened now for sure, because this was the last vintage we actually produced Pinotage on Overgaauw. So we only produced Pinotage from 1970 and then until 78. So quite unique, and I always find it super entertaining digging back into these older vintages. So great to be sharing it. And well, I think I can keep you busy with history stories until tomorrow morning. But just some exciting pioneering work also taking place. Yeah.
Well, I love the history stories. I see Elmarie Rabi, who's watching, pointing out that the slightly older David van Valten and Overgaauw, one of the first members of the Stellenbosch Wine Group when started in 71. I think you were founder members of the Cape Winemakers Guild. 79, you made the first ever Bordeaux blend in South Africa. So for me, what I love about that is that we're going back in history to celebrate innovation, and just remembering that all these things we now take for granted, the Stellenbosch Bordeaux blend, which is one of the hallmarks of Stellenbosch, in 1979 was produced for the very first time. And when you go back, there is so much that can inspire you and remind you as to what changed. For you as the proprietor, the guy behind the label now, yes, you're going back in time, but how much inspiration do you take from those sorts of stories to now shape where you're going forward with your wine journey?
In very short, a huge amount. You referred back to sort of the pioneering work, and I'm very glad Elmarie reminded me of that one. So I recall having conversations with my grandfather about the Stellenbosch wine route, and the way they started, and the excitement and the challenges to getting it going, and I'm also super proud to be part of that, being on the board of directors at the Stellenbosch wine route. So I think we've formed a very close bond over the last 18 months in these challenging times. But I'm super. Yeah, we've got Stellenbosch definitely on the right track with Mike Ratcliffe's leadership there. So very well. Glad to be sort of a third generation. My dad was on there as well. So we're glad to sort of give a bit back for Stellenbosch Wine Roots. And then so coming back to the 70s. So my father joined in 1974, and also maybe just coming back to what's inspiring about these old vintages and that inspires one for the future is firstly sort of obviously the viticultural work that was done in the past, but I'll get to that in a moment of where we're heading with viticulture on the farm. But I was asked recently what was the most memorable wine experience I've ever had, and that was sort of drinking a bottle of 1970 Cabernet with my grandfather in the dining room table at the back here, and then those sort of memories are still the ones that really sort of lingers around in future decision making for sure, and especially sort of you mentioned the 79 Triacorda, which was our first Bordeaux blend on Overgaauw, although there was in the 79 vintage there was a bit of Cinsault blended in, so it wasn't officially part of officially a Bordeaux blend, although I think most wines at the time then had a bit of Cinsault in them. But so the Triacorda name which is our flagship wine at the moment, and one that I obviously have a huge sort of regard for, especially of the history, and also towards sort of the meaning of the name. So my grandfather claimed he could read, write, and speak Latin, but I don't think he could do any of the three really. I recall he would sort of refer to some Latin poems every now and again, but. So the name Triacorda is Latin for three hearts. So it refers to the three hearts of the property. Also, obviously, cultivars that are very close to not only my heart, but obviously in the 2 generations or 3 generations before me, it's Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot with a bit of Cabernet Franc, and then the early 80s, which when it was basically just a Bordeaux, Stellenbosch was then really getting onto Bordeaux blends, and that's where some of the iconic names followed, of course, with Bordeaux blends, and then in 1982 was one of the greater vintages for Stellenbosch, or for Overgaauw especially, and it was also at the time when my father started having discussions with other colleagues in the industry to start the Cape Winemakers Guild, and he took a sample whilst he was busy with his Triacorda blend. He took a sample of the 1982 Merlot to the bunch of friends and colleagues in the industry, and they tasted the Merlot. My dad said, "Well, you want to bottle this as a single cultivar?" And everyone was saying, "Bram, you've got to be crazy. There's Merlot is a blending component. It's not going to work." At that stage, also referring to Pomerol making some of the greatest Merlot in the world. And he then came back, stuck to his guns, and 2 weeks later bottled the first bottling of a single cultivar Merlot in South Africa, which is the Overgaauw 1982. I still have a few bottles of that left. We pull a bottle just in celebration of Merlot on the odd occasion. And since then Merlot has definitely formed sort of the backbone as a variety for Overgaauw. I especially relatively recently in 2017, I got to a point where I realized, my view and on what I'm doing in the vineyards, is it good enough? Do I need to lift my game? And then I connected with Jaco Engelbrecht, who I think is probably one of the best viticulturists in South Africa, potentially even internationally, seeing he's got a whole bunch of international customers as well. And I started working with him in the vineyards, and then I thought I knew a little bit about viticulture, and then I realized after starting to work with Jaco and then with Francois Hannekom at Vem Labor, I realized, Jesus, I don't know anything about vineyards in comparison to these guys. So getting them on board through sort of tough and challenging times as well in the industry, but just sort of them knowing they believe in what we can achieve on Overgaauw. And then with that, and just when Jaco joined me, we started with a leaf roll eradication program. That's also a topic we can speak all night about, but super proud to now say that my Merlot and Cabernet Franc vineyards that were both planted in 2002 by my dad is now completely virus free, and it's just really encouraging to see that it is actually doable, and there's no reason why that vineyard should not become 70, 80 years old if I keep on doing my job and focus and having the expertise of guys like Jaco Engelbrecht in the mix. That's definitely boasting very well for Overgaauw Merlot going forward. But I guess there will always be lots of work to be done, and that's what I've set my mind on. And although it's tough and challenging times and running on own steam, we really, I believe we've got to take a long view on the potential of this just amazing site and the state that I'm very proud to be a custodian of.
I'm seeing on our shared horizon here, David, a 2022 40-year Merlot tasting as we go back to that very, very first one. And it's just another wonderful story. There's so much history to Overgaauw, and Kathy Rath endorses that. Overgaauw, one of the most fascinating wine farms to visit, steeped in history, says Kathy. You also asked a little earlier, Kathy, if Leon's father-in-law still microlights. I've got a quick message back from him. Unfortunately not. His wife stopped him after the 5th emergency crash landing in the Veld. There is your answer. We also have a Nonebo Lushaba saying, me too, Dan. I was also born in 1978. I look like I was born in 1978. You look like you were born in 1988, which is the difference between us, Nonebo. But we can both celebrate this wine, which is the high point of our gathering today. With David, the 1978 Overgaauw Pinotage. Go back. You said that you decided after this vintage to call it quits. Was there a particular reason that decision was taken?
Yep, there you go, Dan. So, also just pulled this bottle from the library a little bit, just about 2 hours ago. So I'll go and pull another one to replace your bottle as a birthday present. Yes, I think there's and I had a conversation with my dad about it a while back, and the main reason I think, and just listening to sort of him and my dad my grandfather at that point working together, was that they just realized the potential of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc on the property, and they just decided, well, that's what they're gonna focus on. And that's something that I think with every generation, and I always have this respect for both of them, is that they both handed over sort of the reins to the next generation on the basis that, let's say, every winemaker only has about, let's say you start making wine at the age of 25 or 26, so you probably have about 30, 35 active opportunities to make wine, and I always sort of, I try not to count them down at all, because I think I really want to try and sort of stick around for vintages as long as possible. But the fact that they started to focus and say, well, let's focus on Bordeaux cultivars, and then that's where they then decided, let's keep the range focused and focus on the Merlot Trio Quarter going forward, and then also with the port cultivar. So that's the main reason. I'm still I have a huge amount of respect for Pinotage, and especially the guys that do make amazing Pinotages. But I must say, tasting and looking at this wine now, it's I might need to reconsider at some point of planting Pinotage on Overgaauw. I'm not sure if you agree.
Well, let's give this wine an assessment. Pinotage is anybody who's followed the grape over the last couple of decades knows it's had a bruising time. It's found a lot of people who haven't fallen for its charms, and I think often unfairly so. It kind of became fashionable not to like Pinotage, and a couple of American wine writers I can think of in particular who like nothing more than to bash a wine you can see they don't really know that much about. Pinotage today, we're seeing a lot of different styles. Pinotage coming out as a lot lighter, paying tribute to the more specific Pinot Noir Cinsault roots, as opposed to the slightly bigger wine that we first saw. This is very much an original style of South African Pinotage. Answer me two questions from your perspective, and entirely yours. What makes this such a good wine, and why, for people who are watching this who maybe don't know so much about wine and why or how it ages, why after 43 years is this wine in so much better condition than the person who's celebrating his birthday in 2 days' time?
So I'm gonna top myself up there a little bit more. Yes, we're just looking at the color whilst I'm pouring it is already fascinating, and I think probably, well, there's obviously many factors that determine the longevity or the ageability of wine, but in this case particularly, I'm just going on a regular basis tasting some of the older Overgaauw wines. I've always noticed that that it has to be a case of, well, depending, or not going to get too technical, but the pH of the wine. So pH, the lower the pH, we know, the more efficient your sulfur levels are, and then the potentially, and then obviously your tannins play a big role in as artificial or just as your natural preservatives. But what I also know about winemaking at the time was that they definitely picked a lot earlier than we were picking now. So this wine, I would, well, obviously alcohol wasn't the regulation at that stage, but if you were to go and analyze this wine, we'll probably have an alcohol of maximum 11.5% alcohol. So if you would pour this wine blind, you would probably have many people rather going, oh, it's just maybe a Pinot Noir, and I've had people that tasted this specific vintage and also the 74 Pinot Noirs. I recall someone thinking that this could be a mature Burgundy, and then then obviously the Cinsault character, which normally also comes in at a higher acidity when you pick it earlier. So I think that combination in Pinotage in those early days have definitely, well, I would think most probably at a young age, this wine would probably been very, very very tight and very maybe inaccessible. So that's probably, and then another thing with also, again, without getting too technical, I think there was also well, I know in those days they didn't really understand malolactic fermentation very well. So that's basically just the bacterial fermentation after alcoholic fermentation. So all they knew was just making the wine after fermentation dry, add the sulfur, and then bottle it, or age it and bottle it. So I'm suspecting that this wine could probably not even have gone through malolactic fermentation because they didn't know really what it was. And as a result of that, I've done a few experimentations actually on Touriga Nacional and a bit on Merlot by not going through malolactic fermentation. So you get quite a lot of that primary fruit and brightness. You don't necessarily get the same width and voluptuousness on the palate if you make a wine in that style. So I think this wine has got all those variables playing in its favor to be able to celebrate a 43rd birthday.
I tell you what, first glimpse of the nose, you kind of get that sort of bit of rusty nail, and you think, it's going to be full of heritage and history, and I'm going to love trying it, but is it still going to be manageable? And then you actually drink it, and it surprised me because it wasn't quite. I was expecting it to be almost a little frayed around the edges, and instead there is a delicacy to it, and it is throwing back to its original roots before it became Pinotage. And it's I always marvel, and you've made so much wine. You've been annoying your dad in the cellar since you were 5. You've got such a wine background of your own, but it still amazes me when I can pick up a bottle that in this case is 43 years old and it's still speaking to me so cheerfully and openly and happily, and still telling such a wonderful story more than 4 decades later.
Absolutely, and I always recall my godfather, Dame P. Bailey, who is always very particular about the fact that if you are older than the bottle of, or if the bottle of wine is older than you are, you should be standing upright and drinking the wine, because this wine is 2 years older than I am, so I should be standing up while I'm enjoying this. But yeah, it definitely, well, especially having occasions like this to share the wines, like, well, with the likes of yourself, is humbling in a sense, and it really draws draws one, well, firstly into the glass, but then just delving into what Overgaauw was like 43 years ago, and then also thinking, so where are we heading with Overgaauw for the next generation? So that perspective is always, I think, always very important, and always there, especially in challenging times where you know that you sort of obviously will be competing against the world. I'd say, well, my sort of fellow South African winemakers aren't competition. We're all part of the same team, and especially also we're a collaboration of a bunch of like winemakers who believe in Cape site specific wines, and I think all of those. All of that makes one really, sort of humbled in a sense that, okay, what are we as custodians under these challenging times are going to do, and what are we going to be the pioneers of, and how are we going to see that well, for me, firstly Stellenbosch, but then all our other sort of celebrated wine regions. So what are we going to do to leave a legacy for our kids one day? And I think that's where my head is at the moment now. It's making the right decisions right now, so that it's, well, almost saying that, well, make decisions as if you're going to live forever. But I guess sometimes you got to sort of also let go of that idea and just do the best you can under what you've been dealt and under the cards you've been dealt. And that's, so obviously, firstly, or lastly, I guess, reaching out to all the other guys in the wine industry and just in general, and all the different industries. The value chain of the wine industry is so deep, and it's not only us as producers, it's literally every single part of the value chain that's taking a strain. So I'll definitely be enjoying, well, celebrating your birthday, and at the same time sort of staying sterkte and stay focused, and to everyone else in the industry and all along the value chain, and their families and loved ones.
Amanda de Klerk saying that the old school gentlemen know how to show respect to great wine. Stand up, take a bow. And I think we've got a wonderful old school gentleman, as you would expect, with the godson of Dame P. Bailey, who is one of the greats. Of that there is no doubt. David, we need to drink some Merlot together, and we will do that, and some of your newer wine as well, because you do make some great stuff. But for now, this has been a really special experience for me. Thank you. I think we've come out of a tough weekend, especially a tough Sunday night as a broader industry, and there are a lot of people who are understandably worried and upset and fearful for a future that does look uncertain. But when you have a glass like this and you see that the wine has, in this case, lasted 43 years, and you know the longevity of our industry, I think it gives you a good nudge in the right direction and a comforting pat on the shoulder. So, David, thank you. This will be helping me to celebrate my birthday week, and doing so in style. Really appreciate the time, really appreciate the wine. Look forward to more of it with you, and to be down at Overgaauw in due course, and spending some time with you in person.
Thank you very much, and I really enjoyed the chat, and all the best to you, and stay safe. And I'll be waiting with the open bottle of wine and some glasses for you, for sure.
Perfect. David van Velden, the latest generation to hold the custodian role at Overgaauw, which since 1905 has been breaking ground, doing cool new stuff, turning the wine industry upside down. The first Bordeaux blend, the first single varietal Merlot, founder members of the Wine Route, founder members of the Cape Winemakers Guild, and in 1978, making a Pinotage that I can't tell you what it was like then, but I can tell you that in 2021, it is a fine, fine bottle of wine. Tracy Rodriguez Snedden, well done, Mr. D. I'm not sure if that's Dan or David, but we'll both take it quite happily. And Amanda reminding us the first bottle Merlot is a standalone cultivar, proudly Stellenbosch. And Lushaba Sterkte to all of you in the wine industry value chain. I think South Africa will pour out our support despite the uncertainties. We love the stories and the products. And I think, Nontleba, you've nailed it there. It is the stories around our wine that play such a valuable role in our understanding, our celebration, and our delight in South African wine. And I hope you've taken a little of that delight out of this evening's show. Remember that tomorrow up online, you'll be able to see a special edition on Bartony and just why their Cabernet and Chardonnay are doing quite so well. There'll also be the chance to win a 3-litre bottle of the Jean Roy from Anthony Rupert. And at 12 o'clock on Wednesday, a very special show in collaboration with Michael Frijon and the Old Mutual Trophy Wine Show. Will be producing a live production which will showcase and announce all of the trophy winners for 2021. That is 12 o'clock on Wednesday, coming to you live from the Houghton Hotel. It is a busy week, the ban notwithstanding. So strong to our friends in the industry. Hang in there. We'll get through this, and know that you've got many people, not just in South Africa, but right around the world, who love, enjoy, and support South African wine. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you back on Thursday for the live edition around International Shiraz Day with Kevin Arnold, Niels Verberg, Carl Schultz, and the Damascene Vineyards, Derek Kilpin helping us out there, and the live show on Wednesday around the Old Mutual Wine Trophy. Enjoy the rest of the weekend as much as you can. Stay safe, stay healthy, and take care. Goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.